Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to our second episode of Talking to the Author, a casual chat with a business book author, hosted by Ron Bettin with special guest Suzanne Lubell. But before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Marlene Hernandez, and I am the office manager here at ReSourceYYC, co-working space for professionals. So if you're looking for a private office to work for the day or on a monthly basis, just let me tell you that this is the right place. We also provide virtual office services in case that you don't want to use your home address for your business. I'll be sharing our website in the chat so then you can find out more information about us and the services that we provide here. But before we start, so be aware that this session will be recorded for you and all of our members to watch later on our website, and we will stop the recording before we start with the QA. So, well, Ron, Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us. And yes.
Thanks, Marlene. And I hope we had a little audio cut out, so hopefully it works good for us during this event here. So, and again, thanks a lot, Marlene. And I would encourage anyone who is looking for an office space or wants to come down and connect, just to even drop in, connect with Marlene. She'll be the friendly face at the door of ReSourceYYC. And also thank everybody that's joined us today, either live or watching on the podcast. We really are doing these to try and help support some of the authors and business subject matter experts in Calgary and create a community of experts and consultants. So today I'd like to welcome Sue Lubell. Thanks for joining us today, Sue.
Thanks, Ron. Nice to be here. I'm glad to join you.
Good, I appreciate that. And you're our second author on our book and our Talk to the Author series. So appreciate that. And a bit of Sue's, so today actually we'll talk a bit about Sue's book. It's Root Cause Analysis Made Simple, Driving Bottom Line by Improvements from Preventing One Failure at a Time. So, Louis, there's a problem about using a backdrop there. So I encourage you after this to either go and get the book, or if you get any involved in any issue that we talk about today, root cause analysis, you'll know Sue and know who to contact. So again, and Sue specializes in asset management and reliability strategy and cost-effective lean maintenance programs and operational excellence. She has over 25 years of practical experience bringing the competencies and capabilities to her clients. And Sue and I have actually known each other for quite a long time. We worked together previously at Encana a long time ago. And Sue, you're saying today was actually 10 years since you left Encana.
Yeah, hard to believe. Time has flown by.
Gone fast. Not much has changed in Calgary in the last 10 years, has it?
Not at all. Nothing.
So it's been, I know from previous connecting at Encana, some of your experience, and since then you've gained a lot of experience and a lot of consulting work you've done around asset management and reliability, including being involved in PMAC, which is a Canadian organization, and worldwide. So maybe why don't we start a bit about that? Actually, I'd love to hear maybe about some of your involvement in the asset management world. Well, why don't we start a bit about during your career and then how that led into consulting and eventually
Sure.
the book.
Sounds good. I think I started off my career as fairly classic, starting off as an engineer and I moved from Ontario to Alberta because this was the hot place to be for jobs when I graduated. And my first experience was Fort McMurray. So so I spent we count winters up there. So in total, I spent 6 winters in Fort McMurray. And I was working, forcing crude in the oil sands, and it was really a great opportunity to learn things. And I realized quickly, though, that I probably wanted a bit of a shift in my career, and I moved to Calgary and went and did my MBA. And that launched me in a bit of a different direction. So less of a technical calculation, but much more about the business side of engineering and the business side, which is what I really like about asset management and reliability. I had a number of different roles throughout my career, and I would I worked in project management as a facilities engineer. I've worked in operations engineering. And then I started to move more into what we consider to be the maintenance management and reliability field, which is morphed much more into asset management holistically across the business. So as I said, most of my career experience has been in oil and gas, oil sands, SAGD, conventional oil and gas. And more recently, I've been doing a bunch of work in the mining and mineral processing sector.
So tons of experience. And I know from our time together, you really got into some of the strategy side around as well.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of that asset management world tends to be a reactive world. If you do nothing, then you're in the reactive world. And again, actually the root cause analysis is about something, a failure has happened. But I think from a perspective of strategic and business, it's really been able to take reactive and make it more strategic and proactive, right? So, and maybe we talk a bit about that. So one of the associations you've been involved in, fact, you're president of the Plant Engineering and Maintenance Association of Canada for, you're not president right now, right?
I'm past president.
But you're past president, and that's really about elevating the world of maintenance and asset management from a reactive jobs to a professional approach to asset management. So tell us a bit about PMAC and what you did there.
So one of the things with PMAC is it's the Asset Management Association of Canada, and it's a national not-for-profit, and it really focuses on enabling the professionalism of maintenance, management, reliability, and asset management. So it's not just about fixing things when they break, it's about bringing the business side to our maintenance, to our reliability, and broader scope to asset management. So asset management is the entire life cycle, and what we traditionally think of as ops and maintenance is during just one phase of the life cycle. And I think that where a lot of my career work is right now is I seem to be specializing in taking those corporate or company or organizational direction and then translating that into something sort of integration and alignment that can be used by the frontline staff to actually deliver value back to the company. And I think that's what I'm really excited about with asset management is how do we connect the dots to deliver value?
Is there a big gap between what's happening out for the operations and maintenance and the people really closely associated with equipment and asset and senior management? Do you find there's a gap? Is that kind of what you're helping to fill?
I find that there is a gap. I think some companies and some organizations are managing to close the gap, but there is still a widely divergent split between what we see often, what sounds simple when you're up at senior management. So the VP, the director, the C-suite thinks it sounds really simple, but when those decisions start to get made at the front line, some of that balance of cost, risk, performance, and what risks are you taking on with that decision isn't fully understood. So I do a lot of work in that integration and alignment piece and trying to close those gaps in practical ways. So figuring out initiatives, setting up these cost-effective maintenance programs that move us from reactive over to proactive, and then also starting to look larger scale at how do you make asset planning decisions, right? Repair versus replace isn't just a heat exchanger, is starting to look at a whole facility.
So I'm going to take a guess that for a lot of companies, no news is good news and they don't get involved unless there's a failure of a critical piece of equipment. And then there's some consequences. All of a sudden that gets escalated to the top because I suspect sometimes it's a piece of equipment they haven't even heard about now becomes critical to the entire operation, whether it's a, you know, and this applies probably to equipment on a facility. I would guess to a server that sits by itself in a dark room in a company, right? It's just a black box, or it's that machine that hums and whirls, or a wire or a cable connection that nobody even thinks about until a failure happens, right? Then all of a sudden that's important, and all of a sudden that piece of equipment is critical. So how do you find that? Do you find companies learn about their critical equipment for the first time during a failure?
Often they do. And I'm thinking, and that's part of the reason this whole book came about. It
Yeah.
wasn't a topic that I started off thinking that I really desperately want to write a book on this topic, but it was one that no matter what happened in my career, I kept getting pulled into it. We've just had a critical piece of equipment break. We've got a huge production impact happening, and we can't even find the lost server that's stuck in a broom closet, and it just flooded out in a field office. We have no idea where it is. So a lot of what started happening was I was getting called in to help with these. And part of the reason for the book itself, there's hundreds of books out there on different methodologies. Some of them are thousands of pages long and they're super technical. This book is part of a series called Made Simple, and it's really aimed at those frontline staff. So you walked into work on a Monday morning and everybody is rushing around like chickens with their heads cut off because they cannot figure out what's gone wrong. And they're tired of troubleshooting, repairing, and getting equipment back in service. And their boss looks at them and says, this can't happen again. And everyone's thinking, no, I don't want to go through this again. So how do we start to bring the business value by preventing these failures? And I find before I wrote the book, I was teaching this internally to the other staff at my company, at my previous employers. I was presenting on it at conferences and things. And what people desperately needed at the front line, how do I get started? How do I explain that it makes sense from a business point of view to prevent these failures from happening rather than just getting really, really good at fixing it every time it breaks? And so to me, we've got a toolkit that says, how are we delivering value back to our employers? And this is one of the tools in the toolkit, but it's often the first entry into that continuous improvement and into bringing the business value. And so the book came about by addressing this definite need, and it's still there because I had a call earlier this week with, could you help me, please? We need to get started on this. I used to work with you. I know you can do this, and I need somebody to help my field staff.
So it's these crisis points that get people engaged.
Frequently.
I'm gonna jump right to the ending. If they do a good root cause analysis, what is going to come out of that they're not going to get up to that point again?
I think one of the big things is if we just start looking for what happened, great. We figured out what to repair, what parts to change, and things like that. We have to realize that at the end of the root cause analysis, it actually needs to turn into recommendations. We need to evaluate them from a business point of view, and we need to make a change and then make sure it prevents it from happening again. So this is why it's usually critical equipment or things that have an impact on our production or our safety, which are driving it.
So anyone who has an office in Calgary and was here during the floods absolutely remembers everything shutting down. Then all of a sudden these servers and pieces of equipment and things that, it's interesting because now COVID has changed everything. Now we have to learn the lesson several times, but this ability to have redundancy, this ability to work from home, this ability for remote office when you have a crisis of failure of equipment or can't come to the office. We've had to learn it a few times, and in some of those, it's basically they had to do a failure analysis on the moment and then change the way we do business, right? So do you have any examples before we get into some of the methodology? Do you have any examples from your career where it's just started out with a failure that you could say people worked it through and ended up with a success?
I think one of the things I noticed, I was laughing because Ron and I were chatting about this in advance, and one of the things he said is, what are the funny stories or things you noticed? And one of the biggest things is when I was writing the book, every time I've presented on this topic, we have a lot of freeze up issues in Canada. So I have presented on this topic in Brazil, in South Africa, all these places. And I realized that every one of my exciting examples, when I'm standing at the front of the room, turns out to be about a piece of pipe freezing up, and they tend to split, and you don't actually notice it until it thaws. So
is that a foreign concept in the tropics?
It completely is. They can think of it and maybe relate to it like an ice cream factory, but there is no comprehension that we can, and particularly in Calgary, we can go from +15 to -20 in 12 hours. Your any water left in a line, particularly say you were repairing something and there's some liquid left in it. Well, water expands when it freezes, and we don't know until the next Chinook comes through. So there's not this obvious correlation between, hey, this happened, last night, and now I've got a leak this morning. Sometimes it can be a couple weeks later that you discover there's a problem because something froze. So I would say from examples, I keep running into a lot of freeze up issues. And guess what? We live in a cold climate. So one of the best things we can do from that is to not just accept that things freeze, but to recognize that. And we can start to look at, does it need to be in a building? Did we have a problem with the heat? Does it need insulation on it? Some of these are very inexpensive fixes to put some insulation around something or something to block the wind, and it can have an enormous impact on your ability to produce and to prevent that failure from happening again, or for draining the lines.
So going back to your the book, it kind of goes through the methodology is at the highest level: quantify the magnitude of the problem, perform analysis using appropriate techniques, develop a list of options for solving the problems, and document the results and implement recommendation, which is motherhood, right? Everybody should be doing that all the time, no matter what, right? But do they? So the reason you have to write a book, and the reason it comes up all the time, is obviously failures still happen. So maybe talk us through a bit of those steps there, and your book is to do it simply, right? So what things do you recommend that people don't just have failures, that they actually do it methodically and work through?
I think one of the biggest things is in the moment or the crisis of an actual failure, everybody is rushing in to save the day. And I think it's important to take a bit of a step and step back and take some photos and figure out what actually happened. So what you want to do is look at how big an issue is this? Is this the server that's sitting in the basement of the building that just got flooded in 2013 floods? Okay, and so what are we looking at here? Or how often is this a chronic failure? And often what we realize is that we've got the same problem happening over and over again. If our maintenance folks are really skilled at fixing something, repairing it, we have all the parts on hand and they know exactly how many minutes, it's down to 12 minutes to repair that, we have a chronic problem. And so if we can address that chronic problem and we can solve it, then we can uncover this hidden plant. We can actually get more production out of it. So things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like keeping track. So if someone's really good at repairing things, they may actually be covering up a chronic problem. So documenting, like, I imagine keeping track of work and repairs and things like that are a key part of actually helping you do the analysis after.
To me, it's about work. It's how long are they spending on it? It's what trades. Often when I walk into a production facility, I look in the garbage can, and whatever part there is a lot of, you can tell is a chronic problem. So you can tell what's happening just by looking at, oh, there's the wrappers from the spark plugs. Well, you shouldn't be going through that many of them. You've got a problem there.
They say some of the best diagnosis on a city's health is in the sewer system. So
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Sound the same. So what are some of the techniques you use for doing analysis then? For actually, so you've had the failure, you've got a team together, you've knowledge, you figured out the magnitude. How do you do an analysis of it?
So when we start doing it, usually what we do is we get a couple of people together. So, maybe 2 to 6 people who are quite knowledgeable about that piece of equipment and about how it works. It does not have to be the person at that particular site or the one who saw it happening, but they need to be from a wide range of different disciplines. And I think that's a key thing, is to have different points of view and somebody who maybe runs that piece of equipment either at that site or at a different site that's got similar ones. And you start to go through. If it's very simple, we can use something as simple as a 5 why, which is really saying, why did this happen? And you ask yourself probably 4 or 5 times, and you go in a loop and you say, well, it happened because of this. Okay, well, why did that happen? And why did that happen? It usually starts to drive you, if it's a very simple failure, to a linear path. If we start to look at more complex failures, we almost end up with ands and ors. And there's a couple of different methods out there. Any of the big name methods will get you to the same answer, no matter what happens. You just got to follow it all the way through. I don't know if I don't want to advertise for anybody, but if you use PROACT, Taproot, Apollo, any of these major methods, and there's a whole lot of them, don't go fly by night here, okay? Stick with the big main methods. You're going to end up with the same answer at the end of the day. The important thing is, that's great. I've now got a root cause identified. I figured it out. It's never about blaming a person. It's all about what information did that person have to make those decisions at that point in time, and how do we improve that? People are going to come up with a lot of recommendations, and we need to evaluate them, figure out what makes sense from a business point of view, and then implement it. And then we should see that we are preventing those failures from happening again. If we already have a maintenance program set up on that equipment and we're still having failures, it's typically because we missed a failure mode. So root cause analysis is very complementary to all the other ways that we set up our cost-effective maintenance programs.
What are some of them other complementary processes and systems?
A lot of times when we're looking specifically at critical assets, we'll use RCM, so reliability centered maintenance, we'll use PM optimization. As you noted earlier, Ron, a lot of the criticality of the equipment dictates that we have actually gone through and thought about what the maintenance program should be on it. And then it's really important to understand what operating context it's in. So what's happening around it? So it's not just a piece of equipment in isolation, what's going on around it?
And so a lot of, well, two things. One, there's a lot of systems you talk about for doing failure analysis. And then there's a lot of maintenance systems that are actually well, asset systems for tracking assets, tracking work done on assets, whether it be mechanical equipment, IT equipment,
yeah.
Things like that. Are they complementary, or how would they support each other? Good maintenance tracking system or a work order system, how would it complement a failure, any of these reliabilities tools? And actually, I kind of the point you set up, what made me think of it is the criticality of the asset. Or there's things you can do within those systems that help identify critical equipment and what to do with them. One, so if you do prevent a failure, and the other, if you have a failure, how to make sure it gets adapted back in your process.
I think that one of the biggest things that the EAM or CMS tools do is they really allow us to do this analytics. And so if we start seeing things, we'll start to do our bad actor analysis. We'll start to look at which assets are causing production loss, which assets are resulting in safety incidents, which ones have the most work orders or the most time or the most dollars. And it all interconnects. This is kind of like a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
And all of that gives hints and clues to, hey, maybe we should really focus our attention here because this is going to drive our business value.
Well, everybody thinks of like airline industry or nuclear. Well, they need to do all that, right? Because they're nuclear or they're an airline, you might drop in the sky. But it sounds like you're talking some of those same principles apply actually to other companies. So at what level do they apply, and how would people apply them?
To me, I think I agree they 100% apply. And what we start to look at is what is the materiality of it. The reason that the airline industry and the nuclear industry are so tightly regulated, and to be honest, oil and gas is as well, is because of the concerns over public safety, the concerns over the environmental damage if there's a failure and things like that. And so what we're seeing is we need to evaluate our equipment, our sites, our systems, and decide what is the impact from a safety point of view, not only for our own employees, but the public at large. We've got drinking water, all of those systems require us to understand what's going on and who could be affected if we have a failure. And as much as possible, I'm a big proponent of preventing failures and using RCA, if we still have one, to go back and figure out what we missed when we were setting up for prevention.
So we talked a bit about this, but what are the most core elements of a good reliability program, whether it be for IT, facilities, an airplane, whatever? What are the core pieces of a good reliability program?
I think we need to understand what the asset or the complex piece of equipment, what are we expecting it to do? And if we don't understand that, we can, and what value it provides to us, we have no way of making good decisions around how we're going to maintain it and keep it going. So that says, what am I expecting it to do? How critical is it to my business? And then what's the most cost-effective way to continue to deliver that value out of it? So it's a bit of know what you own, know what condition it's in, know what value it brings to your organization, whether that's a city municipal water treatment plant or an oil and gas plant, and then how do I maintain that equipment to continue to deliver that value? And sometimes that decision is, when is it time to replace it?
So obviously this is all part of your wheelhouse consulting.
Absolutely.
But you're a one person, so you clearly can go in and help places, but how would people or companies get better at all this stuff? And I'm kind of leading, I think you're actually doing some teaching and education around this as well, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been doing for the last 15 years or so is delivering training on this. So PMAC, the Asset Management Association of Canada, works with the colleges and universities to deliver national certification courses in these topics. And I think that one of the biggest things that we see is the participants in those courses are really keen on not only learning and improving their own personal competency, but about delivering value back to their companies. So I would encourage any of the people listening in here who are interested in this to certainly check out the Maintenance Management Professional Certification, MMP, or the Asset Management Professional Certification. And I think that they provide a whole lot of that tested knowledge and the skills that you can then apply within your workplace to actually deliver value. One of the other things that I'm working on is I'm the past president of PMAC, but I'm the current chair of the World Partners in Asset Management. And it's made up of 7 national, regional, not-for-profits who are similar to PMAC globally. And we're looking at competency and how do we measure competency? And we've got a scheme set up, and PMAC has now got globally accredited certifications. And so not only for individuals who are trying to figure out their own career path, but if you're in a company and you're trying to hire somebody, it's nice to know that the person you're hiring actually has recognized credentials and competency in these topic areas. Before you let them in, do they know what they're talking about?
It's interesting because I think back to the beginning of this conversation, a lot of this was so reactive as an industry, but that sounds like actually making more professional as a profession around the asset management and reliability.
One of the key strategic goals of PMAC is around increasing the professionalism of asset management, maintenance, and reliability. Other parts of the world are a little ahead of us, but in terms of the formalization of this certification, but we have all of the foundational content and the understanding, and we're bringing in the formalization of these certifications.
And we're all about sharing tips and knowledge. So is there any books or anything? So if someone, obviously take the course, hire a good consultant like Sue, but
Absolutely.
For reading, do you have any recommendations for reading or just people to get, to really, obviously the root cause analysis is one book, but it sounds like as a whole reliability, any recommendations around that?
I honestly think in the field of maintenance, reliability, asset management, One of the biggest foundational books is Uptime by Jim Picknell and John Campbell. It is used in the PMAC MMP course 1, the introduction, but really it's a good place to get started and enhance what you already know. I first read it back when it was at edition 1, and it's on the 3rd edition right now, and it just keeps getting better. But it really is a way to kickstart your program. It was designed for, I'm not quite sure where to start, or for operations superintendents trying to support their maintenance folks, and it really gives you that solid foundation for moving forward.
Excellent, great advice. So anything we haven't talked about you think is important to the subject of root cause analysis or reliability?
I think one of the big things I would encourage people to do is just get started. You know, progress. So perfection is the enemy of progress. You are not going to be perfect up front, but any step you take moving forward is a positive step forward. So I would just strongly encourage people to get started at it. There are lots of people out there who are very willing to help. We all get passionate and excited and energized by working on this. And we realize that it's a toolkit. And a lot of this is about knowing RCA is one tool in our toolkit, and there's a whole lot of other ones. And so you want to be able to pull all those pieces together. But I would strongly encourage you just to get started.
Perfect. And we're going to keep, so Sue, we have one of Sue's books here on root cause analysis. We're going to keep it in our ReSourceYYC library here. So if anybody's in here, they'll be here to read. And then if they want to get a hold of you or get their own copy of the book, Sue, how would they best do that?
Easiest way to get a hold of me is probably through LinkedIn. You know, I'll check my email through LinkedIn at the end of the day, but yes, that's probably one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me. You can, Marlene can contact me through ReSourceYYC as well. So that's one way to do this. If you want a copy of the book, you can look on Amazon, or it's published through MRO Zone Publishers with reliabilityweb.com. So feel free to check it out that way.
Good. Well, thank you. And one last question. Was it fun writing a book?
It was fun, but it was really different. I teach a lot. I present a lot. I give webinars, and we have a lot of interaction with people. When you're writing a book, you're staring at a piece of paper, and there's no audience, and there's no person looking at you going, I have no idea what you're talking about, or rolling their eyes like, get on with it and stop giving me examples. I got the point 10 minutes ago. So you have no feedback. So I might write another, but I haven't quite landed on a topic. But it was
that was my question. Are you writing another one? But it sounds like it's a bit of a grueling process. So thanks for grueling through it and coming out with a book then, Sue. Good. Well, and I think so thanks for your time, Sue. We're gonna wrap it up here, and then Marlene, you're gonna close this off, and then anyone who wants to stay on, and we can have a Q&A session after with anyone who joined us live. We'd be happy to do that. So thanks again, Sue, and Marlene, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today. So as Ron mentioned, we're going to stop the podcast just right here. And if you want to know more information about our space, please feel free to reach out or check out our website at resourceyyc.org. If you want to give us a call, please feel free to do so. So we have all the information on our website. You can also email us to find out more information about the services that we provide here. Once again, Susan, Ron, thank you so much for joining us. And to all of you, please stay for the Q&A. And if you are watching or listening to our podcast, so we will see you soon.